Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The Eternal Tower loomed before them, an ancient and impossible structure that defied reason and dwarfed the land around it. Its massive stone walls, etched with forgotten runes, stretched high into the sky, vanishing into clouds that swirled in constant motion. No one knew what lay at the top. No one had ever made it that far. Some believed it was an illusion, a story invented to tempt the desperate. Others were sure the tower was a living thing, one that fed off the ambitions of those who dared to enter. But for these 5 warriors, the stories were just noise in the background. They didn't come to speculate. They came to conquer. Lyra, her armor gleaming under the faint light that pierced the overcast sky, stood in the front. Her sword hung heavily at her side, and she shifted her weight from foot to foot, her mind steady. Behind her, Corin flicked a dagger between his fingers, a smirk playing on his lips as if the challenge ahead was nothing more than a game. Fenna, the healer, clutched her staff, her eyes full of quiet worry. The frail frame of her sister haunted her thoughts, every step feeling like a countdown. Dravan, with his long, flowing robes and arcane symbols tattooed across his pale skin, looked at the tower with hunger. Magic pulsed in his fingertips, eager to be unleashed. Thaler, the ranger, held his bow loosely but kept his eyes sharp. The weight of a mistake he couldn't take back sat heavily on his shoulders. We're really doing this? Corin's voice broke the silence, casual and light. Lyra didn't respond. Her gaze remained fixed on the tower's entrance. She'd heard the stories of death and madness that claimed those who entered. She didn't care. The legends had their purposes, but her comrades, they needed to live again. They had fought with her, bled with her, and died because she hadn't been fast enough, strong enough. This was her second chance, and she wouldn't fail. The gate of the tower opened on its own, the creak of ancient wood echoing through the air, inviting them in. None of the 5 hesitated. They stepped inside, one by one, and the gate closed behind them with a deafening thud, sealing their fate. The hall was vast and empty, stretching out before them like a labyrinth of stone and shadow. The air was cool and damp, and with each step they took, their breaths seemed to grow heavier. The walls glistened with moisture, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed from somewhere deep within. No torches lit their path, but the runes carved into the stones glowed faintly, providing just enough light to guide their way. The first room they entered was lined with mirrors, hundreds of them, each standing tall and casting perfect reflections of the 5 warriors. But something was wrong. Lyra felt it first, a tightness in her chest, as if the air itself had become thick and suffocating. The reflections in the mirrors weren't right. They moved with them, yes, but there was something in their eyes, something twisted. Suddenly, the mirrors began to speak, their voices a whisper at first, then growing louder. "You want to save them, don't you?" a voice cooed at Lyra, the reflection of her armored figure stepping forward from the glass. "You want to bring them back, you can, you know. Just stop fighting. Let go." Lyra's heart pounded as her reflection reached out, the faces of her dead comrades flashing in the glass. They were calling her, their voices soft and full of longing. She could hear their pleas. She could feel their need. Across the room, Corin's reflection was dressed in the finest silks, draped in jewels, seated on a throne of gold. "Why fight when you can have everything? You've always known you deserve it. Just take it." Fenna's mirror showed her sister, alive and well, smiling as if the illness had never touched her. "You can save her," the reflection whispered. "But you must choose. You or her." Dravan's reflection, draped in robes of power, stood atop a mountain of crumbling kingdoms. His eyes were aglow with magic beyond comprehension. "Power is yours," the reflection said, a smirk playing on its lips. "But only if you take it. You're the only one who can." Thaler, his bow clutched tightly in his hand, saw his reflection standing in a peaceful meadow, the disaster he had caused undone. The sun shone warmly on his face, and the guilt that had weighed him down for so long was gone. "It can be yours. Just reach out." The warriors struggled, trapped in the allure of their deepest desires. The mirrors showed them everything they wanted, every dream they had ever dared to hope for. For a moment, it seemed that they would each succumb. But then, from the center of the room, a voice broke through a no. Lyra's voice was firm, her sword raised high as she smashed the mirror before her. The glass shattered with a deafening crash, the reflection dissolving into dust. She stood, breathing hard, her eyes blazing with determination. "Corin, Fenna, Dravan, Thaler," she called, her voice cutting through the air. "This is not real. These are lies. We cannot give in." Her words shook the others free from their trances. One by one, they shattered their mirrors, the illusion breaking with each strike. The room trembled as the last mirror fell, the whispers of temptation fading into nothingness. But the damage was done. Each of them had felt the pull, had seen the life they could have. And the temptation lingered in their hearts, a seed of doubt planted deep. "We keep moving," Lyra said, her voice steady but cold. "We don't stop." The next room they entered was nothing like the Hall of Mirrors. It was an arena, vast and open, the walls lined with shadowy figures that watched them in silence. A voice boomed from the shadows, deep and commanding. "Strength is all that matters here. Show me your strength, or fall." The floor beneath them cracked and split, and from the darkness emerged creatures made of shadow, their forms shifting and twisting as they moved. They were fast, strong, and relentless. The 5 warriors barely had time to draw their weapons before the shadows attacked. Lyra took charge, her sword flashing as she parried and struck with precision. "Stay together," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Corin darted in and out of the shadows, his daggers quick and deadly. He moved like a blur, striking from the darkness and disappearing before the creatures could react. "I've got this," he muttered, his grin returning despite the danger. Fenna's magic flowed through the air, her staff glowing with healing light as she kept the others on their feet. But each spell she cast drained her, her thoughts always on her sister. How much longer could she keep this up? How much would it take before she had nothing left to give? Dravan unleashed a torrent of magic, fire and lightning erupting from his hands as he blasted the creatures apart. But with each spell, he felt the hunger for more. He could feel the tower feeding his magic, offering him power beyond his wildest dreams. All he had to do was take it. Just a little more. Thaler, with his bow at the ready, kept his distance, firing arrow after arrow into the fray. But his mind was elsewhere. He had led people before. He had led them to their deaths. Was he doing the same now? Was he leading them to failure? Just like before, the battle was long and brutal. The shadows were endless, their forms twisting and multiplying as they fought. But the warriors were stronger. They fought as one, their skills complementing each other, their bond growing with each strike. And finally, after what felt like hours, the last of the shadow creatures fell, dissolving into the floor, but the cost was high. Each of them was exhausted, their bodies bruised and battered. And the doubt that had been planted in their hearts during the Hall of Mirrors had grown. "Let's move," Lyra said, her voice hoarse. "We can't stop now." The next room was different. smaller, more intimate. A simple room with 5 doors, each marked with a symbol representing the warriors. An ethereal voice filled the room. Beyond each door lies the power to grant your wish. But only one wish can be fulfilled. The air grew tense. The 5 warriors stared at the doors, each knowing what lay beyond. Their dreams. Their deepest desires. And they only had to choose. "I need that power," Dravan said, stepping forward. "With it, I can reshape the world." Corin scoffed. "Reshape the world? I want wealth. The kind of wealth that lasts generations. I'm not wasting my wish on magic." Fenna's voice was quiet, but firm. "I need it." "My sister," Lyra shook her head. "We can't let this tear us apart. This is exactly what the tower wants. It's testing us, trying to divide us. We have to reject it. All of us." "Reject it?" Corin's eyes flashed. "You don't get it, do you? This is our chance. Our only chance. I'm not throwing that away." Thaler, silent until now, finally spoke. "She's right. This is a trap. We've seen it before. We've felt it. This tower isn't about granting wishes. It's about testing us. If we give in, we lose." For a long moment, no one spoke. The air was thick with tension, the weight of their choices pressing down on them. Then, slowly, Lyra stepped back from the door. "I won't do it. My comrades wouldn't want this. They wouldn't want me to sacrifice everything for them." Fenna followed, her heart heavy but resolute. "My sister wouldn't want me to give up my life for hers. She'd want me to live." Thaler nodded, stepping away. "I've made enough mistakes. I'm not making this one." Corin and Dravan hesitated, their hands lingering on the doors. But finally, with great reluctance, they too stepped back, the room shifted, the doors fading into the walls. They had passed the test, but the seeds of doubt remained, and they were not yet done. The final room awaited them at the top of the tower. It was simple, almost peaceful. A small, open space with a view of the sky. The summit. The place they had fought so hard to reach. But there was no reward waiting for them. No treasure. No power. Instead, the tower revealed its true nature. It was not about granting wishes. It was about testing the purity of their hearts. Each of them was forced to face their final temptation. Alone in their minds, Lyra saw her comrades again, calling to her, offering her peace. All she had to do was stop fighting. Corin was shown a mountain of gold, wealth beyond imagining. All he had to do was betray the others. Fenna saw her sister dying, her life slipping away. She could save her, but only by abandoning the group. Dravan was offered infinite magic, power that would make him a god. But it would cost the lives of everyone else. Thaler was shown a world where his mistake had never happened, where the disaster had been averted. But in this world, his comrades had died. The choices were unbearable. Each of them was faced with their deepest desire, their greatest fear. And each of them had to choose. In the end, it was Lyra's unwavering sense of honor, Fenna's selfless love, and Thaler's wisdom that guided them through. They rejected the temptations, their hearts strong enough to withstand the tower's final test. Dravan, consumed by his lust for power, was left behind, trapped in his own ambition. Corin, too, had betrayed the group, but too late did he realize that his wealth was worthless without those to share it with. Lyra, Fenna, and Thaler stood at the summit, the tower disappearing behind them as they descended. They had not been granted their wishes, but they had found something greater: wisdom, strength, and the knowledge that they had faced the darkness within and prevailed. They walked away from the tower changed, but ready to face the future with clear minds and pure hearts. Lyra, Fenna, and Thaler stood in silence as the weight of what had just happened began to settle. The tower behind them was gone, vanished as if it had never existed. The three of them, weary and worn from the trials, found themselves back at the base of the mountain, where it had all begun. The world around them was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. No grand celebration awaited them. No fanfare. But they had achieved something far greater than they had expected. The sky above had cleared, the once constant overcast now replaced by the soft light of a setting sun. Its golden rays touched the tips of the mountains, casting long shadows on the ground. The warmth of the sun was welcome, but it did little to ease the cold that had settled deep within them. Each of the three carried a weight that was not easily shed. The tower had tested their very souls, and though they had passed, the scars of what they had experienced would linger. Fenna was the first to speak, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "What happens now?" Her eyes were distant, as if she was still trying to process the enormity of their journey. Lyra turned to her, her armor scuffed and dirted from the battles they had fought, but her eyes were calm, resolute. "We go on. We do what we came here to do. We move forward." She glanced at Fenna's staff, which now seemed more like a burden than a tool of healing. Lyra knew that the healer's heart had been tested most of all. The decision to leave behind the chance to save her sister had been a painful one, but it had also been the right one. In the end, Fenna had shown strength where it mattered most, within herself. Thaler, ever the silent one, scanned the horizon, his bow slung over his shoulder. The ranger's face was unreadable, though his posture seemed lighter than before, as if the invisible burden of his past had finally begun to lift. He had been quiet since the tower, lost in thought, but Lyra knew him well enough to understand what he was feeling. He had been searching for redemption, and while the tower had not given him the clean slate he might have hoped for, it had given him clarity. He could not undo the past, but he could live with it. Without another word, they began to walk, leaving behind the ruins of what had once been their greatest challenge. The path ahead was unfamiliar, but it no longer seemed as daunting as it had before. There were no more illusions, no more tests to manipulate their desires or their fears. The world before them was as it always had been, dangerous, unpredictable, but real. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, they were ready to face it. The air grew colder as they descended the mountain, their steps steady but slow, the weight of their journey still fresh in their minds. The landscape around them began to change, the rocky terrain giving way to forests and streams. The sounds of nature replaced the eerie silence that had surrounded the tower. It was peaceful, but the peace felt fragile, as if it could shatter at any moment. As they walked, the memories of the tower remained close, unshakable. Lyra could still hear the voices of her comrades in her mind, calling to her, urging her to join them in peace. But she had made her choice. Her fight wasn't over yet. The path she had chosen was one of life, not death, and she would walk it until the very end. Fenna kept her gaze on the ground, her thoughts consumed by the image of her sister. She had seen her so clearly in the tower, healthy, alive. But that had been an illusion, a temptation designed to break her. She knew now that her sister's fate was out of her control. She could only hope that the path she had chosen would bring her peace in its own way. Thaler remained silent, as was his nature, but there was a sense of calm about him that hadn't been there before. He had faced his demons, had confronted the worst of his guilt, and though it still lingered, it no longer defined him. He had made his peace with the past, and now he was ready to look toward the future. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shades of purple and gold, the three of them reached the edge of the forest. Before them lay a small village, nestled in the valley below. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the distant sound of laughter and conversation drifted up to meet them. It was a simple place, a place untouched by the darkness they had faced in the tower. "We should rest here for the night," Lyra said, her voice low but firm. The others nodded in agreement, and they made their way down to the village. The people there greeted them with kindness, offering them food and shelter without question. It was a stark contrast to the trials they had endured, and for a moment, it almost felt as if the tower had been nothing but a dream. But the scars on their souls were too deep to forget. That night, as they sat around the hearth of the small tavern, the warmth of the fire slowly easing the chill from their bones, they finally allowed themselves to relax. The journey was over, for now. They had survived, and that was enough. But even in the comfort of the village, the tower's presence remained. Its shadow still hung over them, invisible but ever-present. They had passed its tests, but the cost of that victory was something they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. "I wonder," Fenna mused quietly, her eyes fixed on the fire, "what would have happened if we hadn't made it? If we had given in?" "We didn't," Lyra said simply, her gaze unwavering. "That's what matters." Thaler, who had been silent for most of the evening, finally spoke. "The tower was never about granting wishes. It was about seeing if we were worthy." "Worthy of what? I don't know. But we proved ourselves." Lyra nodded, though her thoughts remained distant. The journey had changed them all, that much was clear. They had faced their darkest desires, their deepest fears, and had come out the other side. But what had they gained? There had been no reward at the top, no great revelation or prize. Only the knowledge that they had survived. Perhaps that was enough. The next morning, they left the village, the warmth of the fire and the kindness of the villagers a fleeting memory. The road ahead was long, and they had no clear destination in mind. But for the first time since they had begun their journey, they were free. The tower no longer loomed over them, its tests behind them. They had passed. They had been found worthy. And now, they would continue to walk their path, wherever it might lead. The sun rose high in the sky as they made their way through the valley, their steps steady and sure. The world stretched out before them, vast and full of possibilities. And though the weight of their journey still lingered, they walked with a sense of purpose, a quiet determination that could not be shaken. The tower had tested their strength, their will, and their hearts. It had shown them who they truly were, and in doing so, had freed them from the chains of their past. They were no longer bound by their mistakes or their desires. They were warriors, and they would continue to fight, together. As the sun bathed the land in its golden light, the three of them walked onward, their eyes fixed on the horizon. They didn't know where their journey would take them next, but it didn't matter. They had faced the eternal tower and had emerged stronger for it, and now, they were ready for whatever came next.